and welcome. My name is Penny Meckley Porter. I live here in Erie, PA, and I'm so grateful to the Jefferson Educational Society for hosting me today. And today we're going to talk about, we call them ANTs, automatic negative thoughts, and we also call them cognitive distortions. So I initially talked about automatic negative thoughts, I think on October 23rd, so you can find that video. And I also think I can put it in the comments right here, in case you'd like to go back to the original talk that I gave on automatic negative thoughts. So I won't repeat all of that stuff here. Good, so I put it in the comments. So thank you. Yes, as you know, we talked about automatic negative thoughts. I encourage you to go back and look at that. And you can break automatic negative thoughts into different categories. And so if you just Google automatic negative thoughts or 9 automatic negative thoughts, you'll find different lists, and most of the lists overlap quite a bit. So today is the first in a series of 9 talks on automatic negative thoughts. And today we're going to be talking about all or nothing thinking. It's also called polarized thinking. But before I get into too much more about, polarized thinking, I want to say first that we want to keep in mind about automatic negative thoughts, and this one in particular, polarized thinking or all or nothing thinking. What we do want to keep in mind is that all of us do have automatic negative thoughts. And as we start to realize our own automatic negative thoughts, the idea is to start to recognize them and be like, wow, I do have automatic negative thoughts. No shaming of yourself when you recognize that you have some automatic negative thoughts. No shaming, just like, oh, wow. And then when you try to deal with your automatic negative thoughts and maybe see things a different way, and then later on you'll notice you're caught up in automatic negative thoughts again. No shaming. You're always just like, wow, this stuff is pretty powerful. Or lots of people must struggle with this. Okay, so no shaming. Yes, so automatic negative thoughts are associated with depression, anxiety, and even more generalized things, like how about feeling inadequate? How about feeling like I'm not really up to the task? They're associated with feeling kind of unwilling to try something new, inadequate to the task. I go back to inadequacy, right? And so these automatic negative thoughts, they are widespread. We all experience them. They actually are normal. However, it's really good to question them because otherwise we get caught up in them. And so part of questioning them, here's a write-up that I really like. Cognitive distortions are basically assumptions that we make in our minds with minimal evidence and without considering the evidence and without considering the alternatives. So the numerous kinds of cognitive distortions, basically with all or nothing thinking, we interpret events in pretty radical ways. Thinking in extremes. So either I'm a success or I'm a failure. Or my new business is great or my new business, it's bad. Maybe in my new business, I'm doing things right or I'm doing things wrong. See how I'm doing that? I'm either doing it's all good or it's all bad. Or I'm all good or I'm all bad. But no one's either all good or all bad. And I do have a new business, and maybe some things are going well and some things aren't going well. And if I'm having a bad day, I'm so much more likely to see that, or to think in my brain that nothing is going well. So let's take some more examples. So, as I talk about examples, you're kind of maybe looking through your life a little bit, trying to figure out how much you do this, or where you do this. Most of us do this. So we're really kind of trying to look and see, where do we do this? So let's have an example. Let's say a job interview. Let's say you have a job interview, and during the interview, you're caught off guard by a question, and you don't answer it as well as you would have liked. So if you view this experience through the lens of all or nothing thinking, you're likely to discount your performance during the other 95% of the interview. So maybe the other 95% of the interview was actually, I don't know, pretty solid. Like you represented yourself pretty well. You had some solid answers to some of the questions. Maybe you asked a question that was pretty decent. And then you had that question that they asked you that you kind of flubbed the answer to. Well, so of course you are disappointed in your response. Yeah, what other word besides disappointed? You might be frustrated with yourself or angry with yourself, right? So this gets into all the emotions about it. But the fact is that the facts are these, that the rest of the interview was like solid, but the answer to that question was not. And so you might have a tendency in your mind to really be thinking, oh my gosh, I screwed up that interview. I flubbed up that interview. And you didn't actually flub up the interview. You flubbed up a piece of the interview, but the rest of it was probably pretty solid. And the reason I use the words like solid is because often we're after like some kind of perfection. And perfection is, by definition, unattainable. Perfection is, so if my expectations of myself are like way up here, then it's unattainable. And so can I keep my expectations of myself in this solid range? And it's really hard to do because I often don't think that having my expectations up here is unattainable, right? And so my current example in my life, and this is true, and I hate to admit it publicly, but that is that I have two different businesses, and I often don't return phone calls in a timely fashion. I mean, it's not like 2 weeks late, but still, it's not timely. And so my standard of returning phone calls in a timely fashion, it doesn't really strike me as perfectionism. It seems like kind of a really basic thing. And because I'm so busy with these two businesses, I really struggle to return my phone calls in a timely fashion. And so I could say, I suck. Ooh, I shouldn't use that language here. I could say, I'm really lousy at running these businesses. And the best example is because I don't return phone calls in a timely fashion, and it feels pretty disrespectful of people to not return their phone calls in a timely fashion. Some people call me because they need therapy, and so calling them back 3 or 4 days later just doesn't really feel okay to me. But you see what I'm doing? It doesn't feel like I'm being perfectionistic, because that seems like a pretty basic expectation of myself. But actually, with everything I'm doing right now, I don't seem to be able to manage to return phone calls as quickly as I'd like to. Anyway, not to ramble on and on about that. But, so does that mean I'm a horrible business owner? This is the all or nothing thinking. Either I'm a great business owner or I'm a horrible business owner. And when I don't return phone calls in a timely fashion, it makes me feel like a bad business owner. But maybe I'm good at certain things. Maybe I'm kind of bad at staying on top of the phone calls, but maybe I'm good at, building relationships with people. Maybe I'm good at explaining things to people. Maybe I'm actually bad at returning phone calls in a timely fashion. So I invite you to look at areas of your life where you can get caught up in this all or nothing thinking. Sometimes one of the stereotypical ways that we can get caught up in this all or nothing thinking is when we have like a diet plan or an exercise plan, and we feel that there's a lot at risk, and we want to try really hard. And so let's say I have an exercise plan or a diet plan. Let's say I have an exercise plan and I really need to get in shape. Perhaps I have some health issues. I really need to get in shape. And I decide, because all the advice is that I should, exercise for, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, get my heart rate up, like 5 days a week or something like that. I decide, okay, I'm going to do it because it's important to me and I want to live a long life. I'm going to do it 5 days a week. But then when I miss a day, or when I really mess up on my diet, erase the really. How about if I mess up on my diet a little bit? It might be really a big way of messing up. It might be a relatively small way of messing up. But then my mind goes off to, oh my gosh, I can't do it. And then some part of my mind kind of wants to give up because of the pressure, because of the disappointment in myself, a sense of feeling inadequate. But what if I missed a day? What if I did mess up today on my diet? When the all or nothing thinking grabs me, I'm more likely to give up because of the pressure of it all and the disappointment in myself. What are other examples? I have some examples written down. If I have a bad week, I'll be tempted to say, I had a bad week, which is exactly what I just said. What if there were some really difficult things about my week, and there was even a series of difficult things in like different areas of my life, which makes it extra difficult. Don't you just wish that your life would be difficult in just one area at a time? But let's say I had some difficulties this week and it's in a number of areas of my life. I can really be tempted to say, oh, I had a horrible week. But then, I don't know, maybe I'm discounting the fact that I got to see my great aunt and she's doing well and we had a nice conversation. Social distance, of course, from way across the room. What if I connected with somebody this week, or I finally had a situation come through that I'd been kind of worried about? What if there were some positive things that happened during this actually very difficult week? You see what can happen? I can have this tendency to say I had a bad week. Well, no, I had a really difficult week, and some really difficult things happened, but perhaps there were some good things that happened too. So when I use the all or nothing thinking and I categorize everything as either good or bad, then it actually makes my life more difficult and it's harder to see the subtleties. I guess we should talk about shades of gray. I came from a family where there was a lot of black and white thinking, and either people are good or people are bad. I don't know who's either good or bad. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty good person, and I make all kinds of bad decisions. I make mistakes. I'm not always kind. I don't always follow through on my promises. I mean, I try to, but anyway. So no one could argue that I'm good. And hopefully nobody would spend too much time arguing that I'm bad. I'm really in between. This polarized thinking, certain manifestations of it can be when I use what we call absolute language, and that is when I use the words always, never. That can be an example of this polarized thinking. So if I say to someone, I don't know, if one of my kids says to me, how about when they were teenagers, and one of my kids says to me, Mom, you always do X. Well, you know what? Chances are pretty good I don't always do it. Oh, I was really bad at giving my kids allowance. I mean, I would try to make up for it at different times, but I didn't keep track of it very well. And I felt very inadequate about this. But it didn't make me a horrible mom, although at the time I felt like it did. But I'm not either a good mom or a bad mom. I'm actually trying to be a solid mom, and then I'm going to be good in certain ways that I have some strengths in, and then in other ways I'm probably not going to be that good in areas where I'm kind of weak, right? And so paying my kids the allowance every single week at the same time, some of you guys might be able to do that. I just kind of couldn't seem to manage that, right? And so even if one of my kids said, Mom, you're always late. Well, that's not true, because actually sometimes I am able to do it. We often react when people use always or never with us, but we can use it with ourselves and we can use it with people in our lives. So that's a lot of talking about all or nothing thinking. And I wanted to do a mindfulness practice because we always do a mindfulness practice. And we'll try to bring it around to all or nothing thinking. But let's go ahead with our mindfulness practice. So I'd like you to sit comfortably in your chair, feet flat on the floor, if that's comfortable. Close your eyes, again, if that's comfortable. And bring your awareness to your breath. To bring your awareness to how you breathe in and how you breathe out. Notice your chest cavity, the movement of your chest cavity. With the inhalation and with the exhalation. With the inhale, there's an expansion. With the exhale, there's a contraction. And so you're just kind of anchoring your awareness there with your breath. You're breathing at your own pace, which will be different than my pace. And you're noticing your breath in your body as it expands and contracts. Or perhaps you're noticing your breath at your nose, where you can hear or feel the inhale, and you can hear or feel the exhale. Keeping your awareness right there with your breath. Perhaps noticing, you will notice probably, that your mind kind of wanders off. And as soon as you've noticed that your mind has wandered off, just trying to bring your mind back like a puppy dog. Come on back, sit, stay, and focus on the breath. Always with a gentleness towards yourself and a kindness when you notice your mind has gotten caught up in thought. Feeling your feet against the floor. This is a way to anchor yourself in the present moment. Feel your feet on the floor, in your bottom, in your chair. Knowing the chair is connected to the ground and to the earth. Your feet are touching the ground and the earth. So you are connected to the earth. Now if you could bring your awareness to, with your eyes closed if you can, noticing yourself where you're sitting, in the room where you're sitting. Kind of bringing your mind's eye to an upper corner of the room perhaps, and you're just noticing yourself seated, the chair or couch that you're seated on. There's other furniture in the room, maybe a carpet, I don't know, curtains. You're just noticing yourself seated in this room. So in some way you're kind of observing yourself and what's going on for you, where you are. But we're going to use that same sense of observation to observe what's going on internally for you. You can always notice your body and your feet on the floor, your bottom on the chair, your breath. But let's bring the awareness now, the powers of observation, let's bring them now to the brain, into the sorry, I'm fumbling over my words, and to the thought process. Observing, perhaps your mind has been relatively blank and you've been listening to my voice and kind of following along. Perhaps your thoughts have gone off to different things, that you need to order bananas. Perhaps you're experiencing what we call monkey mind, and that is that the brain is bouncing all over. It's perfectly normal. But being able to observe yourself in the room, observe what's happening in your brain, observing even your thought processes. It's a good thing. So let's leave the observing oneself and re-anchor yourself in the chair, feeling yourself resting in the chair, feeling your feet on the floor, and noticing your breath once again. Then noticing some sounds around you. We're going to come out of our meditation now, noticing the sounds around you, and opening your eyes when you're ready. Good job. So what I'd like you to be kind of practicing in this next week, after we've had this discussion about all or nothing thinking, polarized thinking, I'd like you to notice, endeavor to notice, we don't always notice, but I'd like you to endeavor to notice when you've been doing this all or nothing thinking about yourself, about other people, about situations. And then challenge your all or nothing thinking. Life happens in areas of gray. My father was an all or nothing thinker, and I had a tendency to be an all or nothing thinker about him. And either he's all good or all bad. But guess what? He was a lot of good and maybe some not so good. So if we can take that all or nothing thinking, we also call it black and white thinking. if we can take that all or nothing thinking and look at shades of gray, then that's a good thing. So we can challenge our all or nothing thinking. One other point I want to make today, if you notice other people doing all or nothing thinking, polarized thinking, black and white thinking, if you'd like to talk to them about this and they're open to it, good, go for it. However, watch yourself in a way, because once our own eyes are open to something, we often want to convince other people of the same thing. And we might not be able to convince people. So I encourage you to be aware of your own polarized thinking. If you'd like to talk to somebody else about it, good. But don't get all engaged in convincing someone else. People sometimes are ready for something, a new awareness, and sometimes they're not. And so you bringing your awareness to your own all or nothing thinking, when you notice it, you never shame yourself. Next week, join us again, because this is number 1 in a series of 9 about automatic negative thoughts. Next week we're going to talk about overgeneralizing, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday when we talk about overgeneralizing. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week.